the last time a man stood at attention for me. We were folding a flag over a box that didn't have all of him in it. So when my sister's fiancé pushed his chair back at her engagement dinner, rose to his full height in a room full of people who had spent the whole evening deciding I was an embarrassment, and brought the flat of his hand up to his brow, I forgot, for one entire second, how to breathe. Nobody else moved. The waiter froze with a bottle of Prosecco tilted over an empty flute, a thin ribbon of it already spilling onto the white cloth. And even he didn't look down. My mother had gone completely still. Over her head, the one bad bulb in the chandelier flickered on, the way it would go on flickering all night. The only thing in the room that hadn't frozen, my sister, Sienna, still had a laugh half-finished on her face, the tail end of a joke about me that hadn't quite landed yet, hanging there like something you drop and watch fall in slow motion. And Nate Petty Officer Nathan Rourke, United States Navy SEAL, the man my family had been falling all over themselves to impress for 6 months, held a salute in the middle of a private dining room at the Ashford Country Club. Held it for a woman he had been told, all night long, to be gentle with. Because she'd had a hard time. Because she washed out. Because she gets a little confused about the military stuff. I want to tell you, I felt vindicated. That's the story you clicked on, isn't it? The one where the quiet one finally gets to watch the room turn to ash. But mostly, what I felt was tired. And underneath the tired, something smaller and stranger, the specific grief of being recognized by a stranger. In the exact place where the people who share my blood had just finished pretending I was no one at all. My name is Mara Corbin. I spent 19 years as a Navy corpsman. And there is a version of me my family has never met because, for a very long time, I let them not meet her. Let me back up. You need to understand how a person disappears in plain sight before you can understand what it costs, at 41 years old, in a rented dress, to finally be seen. I live in a 2-bedroom rental outside Norfolk with a kitchen drawer that sticks. In that drawer, underneath the takeout menus and the dead batteries and the spare key to a car I sold in 2019, there is a pair of trauma shears. Angled blades. A black handle worn gray where a thumb goes, and scratched into the plastic. In letters somebody made with the tip of a knife a very long time ago. 2 initials DM. I use them for everything. Cutting open bags of dog food. Trimming the plastic off a new phone charger. Opening the child-proof clamshell that every single product in America apparently ships in now. My neighbor across the hall thinks it's funny, this middle-aged woman going after a blister pack with surgical shears like it personally wronged her. She's never asked why I have them. Most people don't ask. That's the thing I learned to count on. People don't ask. When you come home from certain places, everything looks staged for a while. I remember standing in a gas station outside Virginia Beach my first week back, holding a 20-ounce coffee, and the reverse beep of a delivery truck outside was going off every 4 seconds. I could not for the life of me figure out why nobody else in the store was reacting to a sound that meant something is moving toward you that you can't see. The fluorescent lights, the rows of candy in perfect little regiments, the woman arguing with her kid about a scratch-off ticket. It all felt like a set somebody had built to look like America. Like if I pushed on the wall it would give. Danny Mercer used to say the trick to coming home was to let it feel fake for a while and not fight it. Let the fake feeling burn off like fog off a runway. Danny was the corpsman who trained me, back when I was 22 and thought being brave meant being fast. He was the one who taught me the only thing that has ever really mattered about my job. Which is this: you go back. When it's smart and when it's not. When there's a plan and when there isn't. If someone is out there and still breathing, you go back for them. He said it like it was obvious. He said it like it was the whole religion. Danny went back for a Marine in a place I'm not allowed to describe. And he did not come home. And I have carried his shears in a kitchen drawer for 20 years. That's the first thing you need to know about me. And it's the thing my family knows the least. Here's what they know. They know I was in the Navy. They know I did some medical stuff. They know that I left. And that I live alone. and that I don't talk about it. And because I don't talk about it, they have quietly built an entire story out of the silence. In their version, I tried the military, and it was too much for me. And something broke. I came out the other side a little off, a little fragile. Someone you handle carefully so she doesn't come apart at Thanksgiving. I let them build it. That's the part I've had to sit with. I could have corrected it. At any dinner. In any driveway. On any one of the 10,000 small occasions where my mother said, after everything Mara went through, in that soft, pitying voice, the voice you use for a wounded bird, I could have told them the truth. But the truth is sealed. Literally. My record, the real one. The one with the deployments that don't appear on the deployments list. The unit that officially does not exist. The 2 lines of a citation that got redacted before they ever reached my hands. That record lives behind a clearance my family will never have. And every time I opened my mouth to correct the small, sad version they'd built, I ran into the same wall. I would have had to tell them things I took an oath not to tell them. So I'd close my mouth again. And another year would go by. And poor Mara would harden into fact. There is a special kind of loneliness in being underestimated by people you could never defend yourself to. You start to wonder if the sealed version is even real anymore. If a thing you did that no one can ever confirm still counts as a thing you did. My sister Sienna is 4 years younger than me, and has never in her life had that problem. Everything Sienna has ever done has been on the record. In the light. Photographed. Homecoming court. The right sorority. A marketing job with a title that got longer every 18 months. Sienna curates. That's the honest word for it. She curates the version of the Corbin family that she wants the world to see. And for most of my life, the version worked better if I was slightly out of frame. The tragic older sister. The cautionary tale that made everyone else's ordinary lives look like triumphs by comparison. And my mother Diane let her. That's a harder thing to say than I expected. My mother is not a cruel woman. She's a tired woman who, somewhere along the line, decided that Sienna was the easy daughter and I was the difficult one. It is amazing how much of a life you can arrange around that single decision. Without ever saying it out loud. I got the careful voice. Sienna got the open arms. Nobody ever announced it. It was just the weather in the house. 6 months before the engagement dinner. Sienna called me, which was rare enough that I answered on the second ring, and told me she'd met someone. And not just someone. A SEAL. An actual. Real. Honest-to-God Navy SEAL named Nate. And he was incredible. And his whole world was so impressive. Could I please? For once. Just. Behave at the family events. Because Nate's people were serious. And she really didn't want the Mara thing to make it weird. The Mara thing. I remember I was standing at the sink when she said it. And I looked down and my hands were completely steady, which is a thing my hands do when the rest of me would like to throw something. 19 years teaches your body a kind of stillness. That has nothing to do with calm. Sure, I said. I'll behave. I meant it. Too. That's what kills me a little. Looking back. I meant it the way I've meant it my whole life, the small yes that costs you a piece of yourself. And that you tell yourself is love. I told myself I was protecting Sienna's happiness. I told myself that a wedding was about her. And that a decent person swallows her own history so the day can be about the couple. I told myself silence was generous. I'm not sure anymore that it was. I think there's a version of that story where silence is just the most polite way there is to disappear. The dinner was on a Saturday in October. In the private room at Ashford. The kind of place with a chandelier that has one bulb quietly flickering that no one has fixed and no one will. I wore a navy dress the color. Not the branch. Though I'll admit the joke was not lost on me. Trauma shears do not go with an evening bag. So for the first time in longer than I can remember, I left the drawer closed and walked out the door without them. I want you to notice that. I went to the one event where I would need Danny's whole religion. And I left it at home. I keep thinking about that. Nate was already there when I arrived. standing near the window with two other men who held their drinks the way operators hold drinks like the glass is a temporary assignment. You can spot it across a room if you've lived in that world. Weight on the balls of the feet. Backs to the wall. Edges mapped. Eyes that map the exits before they map the faces. One of them was big and loud and already 3 drinks in, telling a story with his hands. The other was quiet. Watchful. The kind of quiet I recognized because it's mine. And Nate himself, he crossed the room to shake my hand before anyone could stop him. And he had a good handshake. A real one. He looked me in the eye and said, "You must be Mara. Sienna's told me about you." There was a beat there. A tiny one. Because we both heard what he'd been told. And we both were polite enough not to name it. He had been told to be gentle with me. I could see him being gentle. And I shook his hand. And I said it was nice to meet him. And something in me that had been asleep for a long time opened one eye. Because his grip, when he took my hand, had found the ridge of scar tissue across the back of it, the old shiny line that runs from my knuckle to my wrist. I watched him register it. The way a certain kind of man registers a scar, filing it somewhere without a word. He didn't ask. Of course he didn't ask. But he'd felt it. And I would find out, 2 hours later, that some things you file away don't stay filed. Before I tell you what happened 2 hours later, before I tell you how one story, told by the wrong man at the wrong table, undid 6 years of careful silence without me raising my voice a single time, do me one small favor. If you've ever made yourself smaller so a room full of family could feel taller, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read them. All of them. And then stay with me. Because to understand why a Navy SEAL would break every unwritten rule about who you salute and who you don't, you have to sit down at that long table with me and see the evening the way it actually happened. The room had a long table, and Sienna had made a seating chart, and I was at the far end. Down past the flowers in the seat you give the relative you love, but would prefer not to hand a microphone. Nate and Sienna sat at the center. Of course. Radiant. My mother sat at Sienna's right hand where she has always sat. And Nate's 2 teammates sat across from the couple. Like a color guard that had wandered into a wedding registry. The loud one was named Tino Delgado. He had that specific gift some men have of making a whole table orbit him within 10 minutes. And by the time the appetizers came out, he'd already told 2 stories that ended with everyone laughing. My mother was dabbing her eyes. And I could see Sienna glowing at the sheer social capital of it, a table full of her people being charmed by her SEAL and his SEALs. This was the whole point. This dinner was a proof of concept. Sienna Corbin, who came from a nice ordinary family in a nice ordinary suburb, had landed herself a genuine American hero. And everyone was going to sit here and feel the reflected light of it. I have my own way of handling a table like that. And it is the exact opposite of Tino's. His is loud. Mine is the quietest thing I own. When a room gets bright and fast, I bring my heart rate down to 60 and hold it there, a discipline your body learns in the places where a racing pulse gets people killed. I breathe out longer than I breathe in. And I sit with my back straight and my weight balanced over my feet. And I watch. That's the entire trick. Loud fills a room. Steady holds it. Nobody at that table knew I was doing it. And that's the point. You're not supposed to see steady. In a family like mine. In a room like that. You're only ever supposed to see loud. The quiet one across from Tino was named Wade Baxter. He drank water. He watched the room the way I watch rooms. Twice I caught him doing the thing cataloging. Checking. Resettling. Once our eyes met over the centerpiece and he gave me the smallest nod. The kind you give another person who's noticed the exits. And then he looked away and neither of us made anything of it. But I filed him. The way he'd filed me. It takes one to know one. And it takes one to be quietly, privately relieved that there's one more in the room. The toast started with the salad. My uncle went first. Then a cousin. Then Sienna's maid of honor. All of them landing the expected notes finally. We were starting to think she'd never, Then my mother stood up, wine glass trembling just slightly in her hand. I felt the whole shape of the evening tilt toward me before she even opened her mouth. Because I have a lifetime of practice feeling that particular tilt. I just want to say, my mother began, how happy I am. Both my girls. She looked at Sienna. Then she looked down the table at me. And her face did the soft thing. The wounded bird thing. And she said, "And Mara, sweetheart, I know things haven't always been easy for you. After everything you've been through. It means so much that you're here. And that you're doing so well." She lifted her glass an inch. "We're all just so glad you're okay." Here is what nobody at that table heard. Because it happened entirely inside my own chest, I have pulled 4 grown men out of a building that was coming down around us. One of them across 40 meters of open ground. With my own blood running into my left eye from a cut I didn't feel until 3 hours later. And my mother raised a glass to me being okay. The way you'd toast a woman who'd finally gotten out of bed after a rough patch. And the whole room turned and looked at me with that same wet, gentle pity. Somebody said awe. And I understood. Fully. For the first time. That in this family I was not a person who had done things. I was a situation that had. Thank God. Resolved. I smiled. I lifted my water. 60 beats a minute. Out longer than in. My hands were completely steady, they always are. At exactly the moment the rest of me would like to put a glass through a wall. "Thanks, Mom," I said. That's the sentence I keep. Of everything I said or didn't say that night. That's the one I'd take back if I could. Thanks, Mom. 2 words that cost me the same piece of myself they always cost. Handed over one more time. Wrapped up to look like Grace. 12 years earlier. The valley had no name that I'm cleared to give you. And the building we needed was on the far side of a wash. The plan there was a plan. There's always a plan died about 90 seconds into contact. I was in the rear vehicle with the medical kit and a radio. Which is where a corpsman like me was supposed to stay. Then the lead element's calls changed. You learn to hear it. The cadence goes from clipped and flat to something with edges. A voice you know says a number of wounded that is higher than the number of people who can carry them. Then the building they'd taken cover in took a hit and the roof let go on the north side. I heard a young operator's voice, very young. Very steady. The steadiness of a man deciding he is about to die and choosing to sound calm about it, call his own status and then stop calling. You go back. Danny's whole religion. 1 syllable at a time. There's no decision in it by the time you're moving. Your body has already done the math your mouth hasn't caught up to yet. I remember the dust tasted like a penny. I remember counting 1, 2, 3, 4 men I could reach and 1 I couldn't. 1 who was already past anything I carried in that kit. I remember the specific arithmetic of that. The way you hold a man's face in your 2 hands and run the numbers. And the numbers come back the same no matter how many times you run them. 11 minutes. Start to finish. 0340 when the north wall came down. 4 out. 1 I left. Because leaving him was the only way to bring the 4. I have rerun those 11 minutes more times than I have run any other 11 minutes of my life. Looking for the version where it's 5 out. There isn't one. I've looked. The 4 who came out, I never learned most of their names. That's how it works in that world. You are a set of hands in the worst moment of a stranger's life and then you are gone. The paperwork that would connect you to them gets sealed inside a unit that isn't listed anywhere. You carry the 11 minutes home in a kitchen drawer and you don't talk about it. Because you can't. And after enough years you start to wonder if it counts. Back at the long table. The entree came out. And the wine kept coming. And Tino got louder. Somewhere in there the conversation turned the way it always eventually turns when there are military people at a table to what everybody did. It started innocently. Nate asked me. Across the flowers. With what I could tell was real courtesy. Sienna says you were Navy too. What'd you do? And the whole table went a particular kind of quiet. Not silence. The quiet of everyone bracing to be gentle. My mother's hand found her wine. And before I could answer, before I could even decide how to answer, which is a calculation I've done 1,000 times and never gotten comfortable with, Sienna laughed. That bright, managing laugh, and reached over and patted Nate's arm and said, "To the table. Not to me. Oh, Nate. Honey. Don't put her on the spot." She smiled at me the way you smile at a child who's about to try to tell a story and get the ending wrong. Mara was in for a little while. It's kind of a sensitive thing. It didn't end great. And she gets a little turned around on the details. So we just, we keep it light around Mara. We keep it light around Mara. She said it warmly. That's the part I need you to understand. Because if you picture a villain sneering, you're picturing it wrong. Sienna said it the way you'd describe a food allergy. Kindly. Protectively. As a service to the room. And every head at that table nodded along. Because they'd all been trained by the same weather I'd been trained by. Nate's teammate Baxter looked down at his water glass. And Nate looked at me. Just for a second. A little longer than the moment needed. I don't think he knew yet what he was looking for. But he looked. I could have ended it right there. Do you see how close it was? One sentence. Actually, Sienna, I did 19 years. I deployed more times than I can tell you. And there is a citation with my name on it that neither of us is cleared to read. One sentence. And the whole gentle machine would have jammed. I didn't say it. And I want to be honest with you about why. Because it's not the flattering reason. It wasn't only the oath. It was that after 30 years of being the difficult daughter, some part of me had come to believe them. Some part of me heard she gets turned around on the details and thought, in a small cold voice, maybe I do. Maybe none of it happened the way I remember. Maybe I'm exactly what they think I am. That's what the erasing does. If you let it go on long enough. It doesn't just change what the room believes. It gets into you and starts changing what you believe. So I looked at my sister, and I said, evenly, yeah, we can keep it light. And Baxter, the quiet one, lifted his eyes from his water and looked at me for a long, level moment. And I could not read his face at all. It should have ended there. And it didn't. Because my Aunt Carol had been waiting all night for an opening. She told the story she loved the 4th of July. I'd hit the deck when a neighbor sent a big mortar firework up over the fence. And I'd gone right down and taken the whole cooler with me. She made the fluttering gesture. Hand to chest. But she's come such a long way. The table did its sympathetic murmur. And my mother said, she has. She really has. To them it was a funny, sad anecdote about poor fragile Mara and the fireworks. To me it was the truest thing anyone said all night. My body knew the difference between a holiday and incoming a full second before my mind got a vote. And the reason I knew is a story none of them will ever be allowed to hear. Nate wasn't laughing. He was watching Carol with a small crease between his eyebrows, the first crack in all that careful gentleness. A man who'd gone down on his share of decks. Hearing something in the story the storyteller couldn't. I went out to the terrace between the entree and the dessert. I told myself it was for air. It was really because I could feel the specific pressure behind my eyes. That means the stillness is getting expensive. I have learned to remove myself before the stillness costs more than I can pay in public. The terrace looked out over the 9th green, floodlit and empty. The grass an unreal color in the light. It was cold. I stood at the rail and breathed, and did the thing Danny taught me, counting the breath out longer than the breath in, until my heart came back down to where I keep it. The door opened behind me. It was Baxter. He came and stood at the rail, not too close, and didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, looking out at the green and not at me, "How'd you get the scar?" Nobody had asked me that in years. I looked at the back of my own hand in the floodlight, the old shiny ridge of it. "Building came down," I said. "A long time ago." He nodded slowly, still looking at the grass. Figured it was something like that. A pause. The way you moved when the kid dropped the glass earlier. I hadn't thought he'd caught that. Halfway through the entree, my 6-year-old cousin had knocked a water glass off the table and it had shattered. I'd been on the floor with the pieces and the kid's bare feet before the sound finished, checking his soles. My hands doing the old triage sweep without asking permission from the rest of me, Sienna had said, laughing, embarrassed. Mara, honestly, sit down, it's fine, it's just a glass. And I'd sat down. But Baxter had watched the whole thing. Of course he had. Old habits, I said. Yeah, Baxter said. And then, quietly, still not looking at me, in the voice of a man saying something true and letting you do with it what you want. You don't move like somebody who washed out. I didn't answer that. I couldn't, without opening the sealed door. And I wasn't going to open it on a country club terrace. But something in my chest loosened one notch, the notch of being, for 11 seconds. Correctly seen by a stranger who owed me nothing. He finished his water. I'll leave you to it, he said, and he went back inside. I stayed out in the cold a little longer. And I did not know, I swear to you, I did not know that inside. Tino Delgado was 4 drinks deep and about to tell the best war story he had. The one that always killed at parties. The one about a night his older cousin's element should have died in a valley with no name. And the corpsman they never met who came back through the whole thing. The one the teams still tell stories about. The one they only ever knew by a call sign. When I came back inside, dessert was on the table and Tino was standing up. He had a glass in his hand and that shine in his eye. And he was saying, no, no, everybody. Listen, I gotta tell you about this guy. He put his other hand on Nate's shoulder. And the table hushed into the delighted quiet of people who know a good story is coming. Sienna was beaming. My mother had her hands clasped under her chin. I slid back into my seat at the far end, past the flowers, and I picked up my dessert fork. I had no idea that the next 4 minutes were going to take the drawer in my kitchen and open it in front of everyone I'd ever hidden it from. So Nate never tells this one himself, Tino said, 'cause he's humble. Right. He's the humble one, but I gotta. Because you're marrying him, and you should know what you're getting. He looked around the table, milking it. A born storyteller. 12 years ago. Nate's a brand new guy. First real deployment. And his element gets sent into this valley, I can't tell you where. So don't ask. And the whole thing goes sideways about a minute in. They're pinned. Building they're in starts coming apart. They've got wounded, they can't move. And I mean, it is bad. It is the worst case. Everybody writes a letter home kind of bad. The table wasn't laughing now. My mother's hands had come down from under her chin. Sienna had gone still in the particular way of someone realizing the story about to be told is not a party story. And here's the thing, Tino said, and his voice dropped. Even 3 sheets to the wind. He found the gravity in it. There's this corpsman. Not even their unit attached. From one of the outfits that, doesn't show up on any list. And this corpsman comes back, through all of it, comes back into that building when there is no reason on God's earth to come back, and pulls those guys out one at a time. And the last one across. Like 50 meters of open ground with rounds coming in the whole way. He shook his head. 5 guys. Pulled 5 guys out. And nobody ever even got a name. Just a call sign. The teams still talk about it. To this day. They called this corpsman 4. I said. I didn't decide to say it. That's the thing I need you to understand. I have never in my life volunteered one word about that valley. And I did not volunteer this one either. It came up out of me the way your hand comes up when something's falling before thought, from someplace older than thought. Because I had spent 12 years alone with those exact 11 minutes, and to hear them said out loud, at a dinner table, over dessert, and said, wrong, was more than the stillness could hold. The table turned and looked at me. It was 4. I said again, quietly. To my plate more than to anyone. Not 5. And it wasn't dawn. It was 0340. My voice had gone flat and small. The wall came down at 0340. There was a beat of nothing. And then Sienna laughed that bright. managing. God help us laugh, and put her hand on Nate's arm again and said, to the table. Oh, see, this is what I mean. This is the thing. She does this. She gets so sure about the Mara. Sweetie, you weren't there. You don't have to. She didn't finish. Because Nate had gone the color of ash. He wasn't looking at Sienna. He wasn't looking at Tino. He was looking down the length of the table, past the flowers, straight at me. His face had done something I have only ever seen on the faces of men in the worst moment of their lives, which is that it had emptied out completely, gone blank and white and open. The look of a man watching something he buried 12 years ago. Walk back into the room. How do you know it was 0340? Nate said. It wasn't a question. Exactly. His voice had no bottom in it. The table's laughter died in stages. Sienna's hand was still on his arm, frozen there. Nate, she said. Baby. What? How do you know it was 0340? He said it again, louder, and he stood up out of his chair without seeming to notice he was doing it. I have never told that to anyone. It's not in the story. It's not in any version of the story. His eyes hadn't left me. There are 3 people alive who know it was 0340, and 2 of them his voice cracked. Once. Clean down the middle 2 of them didn't make it out of that country. The room had gone completely silent now. The good kind of silence had left, and this other kind had come in. The kind with weight. The kind that presses on your ears. And I watched him assemble it. I watched it happen on his face in real time, the scar he'd felt on the back of my hand when he shook it. Building came down. A long time ago. The way I'd been on the floor with the broken glass and the kid's bare feet before the sound finished. The number. The time. And whatever he was seeing now in my face. That I couldn't keep off it anymore. I watched 12 years close like a circuit. It was you, Nate said. Not a question. A verdict. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The sealed door was standing open and I had not opened it. Someone had opened it from the other side and there was nothing left in me to do but sit there and let him see. Nate came to attention. I want to describe this exactly, because it is the thing you came here for. And it is the thing I will remember on the day I die. He was not a man who did things dramatically. He squared his shoulders, he set his feet, and a Navy SEAL at his own engagement dinner. In a country club dining room under a chandelier with one flickering bulb, brought the flat of his right hand up to his brow, and held a salute for the woman his fiancé had spent an entire evening calling a washout. Lazarus, he said. That was the call sign. The one the teams still tell stories about. The one nobody at that table had ever heard, because it lived in a place none of them were cleared to go. He said it like a prayer he'd given up on ever getting to say. Across the table, Wade Baxter stood up. He didn't hesitate for a second, he just stood, and came to attention, and raised his hand. I understood then what his face had meant on the terrace. That he had already more than half known. He'd been waiting to see if I'd say it myself, and had respected me enough not to say it for me. And then Tino, still holding his drink, his whole storyteller's shine gone, put the glass down slowly on the tablecloth and stood up too, and raised his hand. The 3 of them held it. And the family, the waiter had come back in with the coffee and stopped dead in the doorway. My mother's champagne sat untouched in front of her, the bubbles still climbing in a glass nobody was ever going to drink. My uncle's mouth was open. The maid of honor had a hand pressed flat over her own chest, and above all of it, in the middle of that frozen room, the one bad bulb in the chandelier went on stuttering against the ceiling. The bulb nobody had fixed all night. The bulb nobody ever would. The only thing left in the whole room still moving. I looked up at it while a Navy SEAL held a salute beneath it, and I almost laughed, because I finally understood what it was. It was me, the flaw everybody at that table had quietly agreed to stop seeing, because to really see it would have cost somebody something a chair dragged over, a hand raised over your head, an admission that it had been there, flickering, the whole time. For 41 years, no one had been willing to pay it. And now a stranger had stood up and looked straight at it, And Sienna, my sister Sienna, whose evening this was, whose proof of concept this was, whose whole beautiful, curated version of the Corbin family had just detonated in a single word she couldn't even hear the meaning of. Sienna's smile was still on her face. That's the thing I noticed. It hadn't caught up. It was still hanging there, the bright, managing smile. And I watched it slowly curdle and then slide off, the way frost goes off a windshield when the defrost finally kicks in, from the inside out, until there was nothing underneath it but a woman staring at a man she was about to marry, who was standing at attention for a person she had built her entire self-image on top of the ruins of, 3 seals, holding a salute, a table full of my family, holding their breath, and me, at the far end, past the flowers, in a navy dress, with my hands, for once, for the first time in my whole life, at a table like this, not steady at all. Loud fills a room, steady holds it. I had held every room I ever walked into, for 19 years, with a pulse I could keep at 60 through almost anything the world put in front of me. And the one time it stopped mattering who in that room was loudest, the one time the quiet thing I owned turned out to be enough, my hands shook like a brand new corpsman's on her first bad night. You spend your whole life keeping steady because no one is coming, and then someone comes. And steady is the very first thing you get to put down. I found my voice. It came out quiet. I have thought a great deal about what a person is supposed to say in a moment like that. And the honest answer is that there is nothing. There is no line. The movies lie to you about the line. So I said the only true thing I had. At ease. Petty officer. I met Nate's eyes. And then, God forgive me, I let mine travel just once down the table past my frozen mother, to my sister and back. I'm just Mara, I said. Ask my family. Nate held the salute a beat longer. And then he brought his hand down. The first thing he did, the very first thing, before he explained anything to anyone, was walk the length of that table, past the flowers, and crouch down beside my chair so we were eye to eye, he said. Very low, just for me. It was you. You're the reason I got to be here tonight. You're the reason there was a tonight. And then, still crouched there, he turned his head and looked back at the table full of my family. At my mother, who had gone gray and still and said nothing. At Sienna. Something moved across his face that I don't think he could have hidden if he'd tried the slow, terrible arithmetic of a man realizing that the woman he loves has spent years telling everyone that the person who saved his life was a broken embarrassment they had to handle carefully. He didn't say any of that, but it was on him. And Sienna saw it land. And I watched my sister understand, all at once, that the ground she'd been standing on her whole life had never been ground at all. I'm supposed to tell you that was the sweetest moment of my life. That's the shape of these stories. The Washout is a war hero. The salute lands. The cruel sister crumbles. Roll credits. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like a wall coming down. I have been in a building when a wall comes down. There is no version of that where you walk away clean, no matter who was standing on the other side of it. Because here's what I actually learned, sitting in that chair while 3 men held their hands to their brows. I had always believed being useful and being loved were the same door. Being necessary was the only currency my family took, and I had a great deal of it to spend. They were never the same door. There is a kind of person who will let you save their life, and still not cross a room to save your dignity. Blood makes you related. It does not make you safe. I used to think I wanted to be seen. That was the ache under everything, just to be seen. Once. For the whole of what I was. And that night I got it. More completely than I ever imagined. And I learned that being seen is not a gift somebody hands you across a dinner table. It's a bill. It comes due. All at once. For every single year they were allowed to look away. I paid it in front of everyone I loved. And the change I got back was the ruins of the only family story I'd ever had. I want to be fair to my sister, even now. Especially now. The easy version of this makes Sienna a monster. And she isn't one. She's a frightened woman who figured out very young that she looked taller standing on top of me, and who never once let herself feel how that would sound if she said it out loud. She didn't set out to erase me. She just needed the version of me that made her feel like enough. And she kept it alive for 30 years the way you keep any lie alive by never, ever letting the light in. People keep using the word revenge with me, and it sits wrong every time, because I never wanted to do anything to Sienna at all. I just wanted the room to finally see what had been sitting at the far end of the table the whole time. People want the version of this where the salute finally taught me my own worth, where the quiet washout walks out of that dining room understanding, at last, that she mattered all along, but I didn't learn my worth that night. I have known exactly what I am since I was 22 years old in a valley I can't name, holding a man's face in my 2 hands and running numbers that came back the same no matter how many times I ran them. The salute didn't make me somebody. I was already somebody. The only thing that changed in that room was how many people were willing to look at her. For 19 years, I carried that truth quietly, and told myself the quiet was a kindness, sparing the people I loved, the sharp edges of who I really was. Maybe it was, but a quiet truth is still true. Mine waited 12 years, in a sealed file and a kitchen drawer. And then a stranger said a name over dessert, and it stood up in that room exactly the size it had always been. The wedding is on hold. I'll tell you that much, because I know you want to know. And because I won't pretend to you that the salute fixed my family the way it would in a movie. It didn't. Nate and Sienna are working on it, is the phrase people use. Some things you can apologize for. I'm honestly not sure this is one of them. And I don't envy either of them the conversations they've been having. I've stayed out of it, because it is theirs to carry and not mine to referee. My mother called me 11 days later. Not to apologize, my mother is a tired woman, and apology is a muscle she never built, but to say, in a small voice, I didn't know. And I said, I know you didn't, Mom. And I did not say the rest of it, which is that she didn't know because she never once asked, in 30 years. And that not asking was its own kind of answer. There's a version of me that says that out loud. I'm not her yet. Maybe I never will be. That's one of the wounds I've made my peace with leaving open, because I've learned that not every torn thing is supposed to heal into the same shape it was. Some of them you just carry, the way you carry a scar on the back of your hand, or a pair of shears in a drawer. People ask how it's even possible of all the tables in the world, that story finding its way to mine. But the teams are a smaller world than you'd think. A thing like that gets passed around for years, worn smooth in the telling, and the community it lives in is close enough that sooner or later it was always going to walk into some room where the corpsman was sitting at the far end, past the flowers. Being told to keep it light, I've stopped calling it a coincidence. Nate and Baxter and Tino take me to breakfast now, once a month, a diner off the interstate. Bad coffee, the good kind of bad. They don't ask me about the valley and I don't tell them. And there is a whole world we can sit inside together without a single word, which is a thing my own family never managed in 4 decades. Baxter says almost nothing. Still, Tino talks enough for all of us. And Nate looks at me sometimes across the sticky table like he's still doing the arithmetic, still landing on the same impossible sum. And every time he does, I tell him to knock it off and drink his coffee. Gratitude is heavy. I've carried heavier. But I'd rather he put it down. Family, it turns out, is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's 4 strangers from the worst night of your life, sitting in a vinyl booth, letting you be exactly the size you actually are. You go back. Danny Mercer taught me that in a valley 20 years ago, and I have spent my whole life being the one who goes back into the building, across the open ground, toward the sound of the thing coming apart. It took until I was 41, at a table full of people who had already decided who I was, for the rule to finally come back around the other way. Danny would have liked that, I think. He'd have said it took long enough. I went home from that first breakfast and I opened the kitchen drawer that sticks, and I took out Danny Mercer's shears. For 20 years, those shears meant one thing to me: you go back. You go back for people. when it's smart and when it isn't. Because someone out there is still breathing, and that is the whole religion. I've cut open 1,000 blister packs with that religion, butchered 1,000 bags of dog food, kept a dead man's whole philosophy alive in a drawer under the takeout menus where nobody would ever think to look. They still mean that, but they mean something else now, too, and I've only lately let myself hear it. Because Danny's rule was never only about the men in the building. You go back. For anyone still out there, still breathing, still waiting for someone to decide they're worth the trip across the open ground, even if the person out there, all this time, in the dark, uncounted, is you. I didn't put the shears back in the drawer. I keep them on the windowsill now, where I can see them. D.M. Scratched in the handle by a hand that's been gone for 2 decades. In the light, where they belong. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. If you take anything from a woman who spent 19 years being the person other people came home to, let it be this. The people you would die for are not always the people who would cross a room for you. You are allowed to know the difference. And to go where you're seen. So let me ask you, have you ever let the people you'd give your life for convince you that your life was worth a little less than theirs? Have you ever gone quiet to keep a peace that was only ever peaceful for one side of the table? Have you ever had to be recognized by a stranger before your own family would look up? If any of this found you where you live, do me one last favor. Type "I went back" in the comments. I'll know what you mean. And if this is the kind of story you need right now, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because there's a new one waiting for you. Same time, every day. And I'd be glad to have you back. Take care of yourself. Go back for the people worth going back for, and don't forget that you're one of them. I'll see you in the next one.